Hey everyone, this is lecture 8.1, Impacts of Poverty on Children. This time we're going to talk about, it's pretty straightforward, the impacts of poverty on children, and then how do we make people care about children? Because one of the uglier elements in our society is that while we say we really care about children, a lot of people just don't. So, in previous sessions, we briefly addressed issues that relate to children in kind of a broad sense, but in this session, we're going to talk about how poverty impacts children and how we can encourage the general public to care more about children. At all stages of childhood, there are negative effects of poverty that affect kids and their development, and these can follow an individual through their life course. Put a different way, the stuff that happens to you as a kid is super, super important to your development. Additionally, poor children experience lower levels of physical and mental growth. And um, and really just put it all into consideration. Think about the quote bad kids you went to school with, and a lot of the kids that had a real hard time maybe staying awake, maybe with a lot of things. Those were probably the poorer kids because academics is way more than just hard you try. You can't try yourself out of dyslexia. You can't try yourself out of being good at gym if you can't walk, right? Like there are some things that definitely you can't try yourself out of. Once children then enter adolescence, we see more complex disadvantages. So, and that's not to say that childhood development itself isn't very complex, but things aggravate and exacerbate when we move into 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Uh, that is really the area where schools start getting markedly inferior. So the things that are needed to make elementary school education are sort of inexpensive. A lot of things have changed in recent years surrounding computers, but you can still teach a kid to read and to math relatively well on the elementary school level without a lot of tech in the school. However, when you get into middle school, and especially you get into high school, when things are starting to get more about job and college orientation, the lack of resources, the lack of highly trained teachers really catches up with people. Environmental hazards are a huge deal. A school district that is underfunded probably has pretty old buildings and probably has issues with those buildings that are actually dangerous. Other unmet health needs. Parents are super, super busy, and teens like to kind of keep what's happening with their body to themselves. So if parents aren't able to actually help spot that kind of stuff, or if there just isn't proper health care, that can happen. Teen pregnancy goes really closely along with that. Unfortunately, many schools that are underfunded also abide by abstinence-only education nonsense. And the fact of the matter is that if a school is a little bit hesitant about sex, sex ed is one of the things that's sometimes seen as being a little bit extra, while in reality it is one of the most important things about a child's education, both to understand how to be sexually safe and also how not to cause pregnancy. There is a direct connection between abstinence-only education, teaching kids that there's no such thing as safe sex, and teen pregnancy. It simply doesn't work, and you have to teach kids how to avoid pregnancy. That's one of my soapboxes. Exposure to tobacco, alcohol, opiates, other addictive substances, including really sugary drinks. Mountain Dew is really, really bad for kids' health. And okay, a couple Mountain Dews a week even won't even hurt you. But if you're drinking it like hydrating with Mountain Dew, and it's like all you drink, and that exists a lot in poor areas, especially poor rural areas. That's a big health problem that can lead to diabetes. It can lead to teeth issues. It can even lead to liver damage. And then also, if you go to a bad school, if you go to a school that is not connected with the economics of the community, there are fewer job opportunities. There are especially fewer job opportunities for those not going to college. And all of this continues and perpetuates poverty cycles. Now, it is true that genetics and socialization both play a heavy role in childhood development. Socialization there being defined as the process through which we learn how to interact with society. Most childhood developmental socialization, I'm sorry, let me restate that. Most socialization does occur during childhood, and the works of George Herbert Mead really talk a lot about that. However, we as adults also go through the socialization process. And then to touch on genetics for just a moment, there are many diseases that, well, not things about us that are determined by who our parents are. There is ADHD and autism on both sides of my family. That is absolutely genetic, and I know parts of that do influence who I am. That's one piece of who I am, and another big piece of who I am is the lived experiences I've had and the coping mechanisms I've developed. And that's also what every single child has going into school, and we need to be aware of these things. Early interventions then have a very strong correlation with many problems that arise in childhood. This is defined as any number of measures that will prevent or mitigate problems later in life. So if there are issues surrounding gangs, drug use, teen pregnancy, depending on the individual topic, if you can get a kid going real solidly and being real socially integrated in elementary school, if you can get everything lined up so that kindergartners, first graders, second graders really like school and are excited about school, and they develop role models in their communities, then those kids are less likely to get heavily involved in those things that can become barriers in teendom and can make a kid that'll just say, you know what, I see that, I'm not going to do that, right? And of course, that doesn't fall with teen pregnancy. With teen pregnancy, we want kids to say, I am going to have sexual contact in a responsible way. Examples of early interventions include preschool programs like Head Start, as we mentioned earlier, after-school tutoring, or other types of tutoring. Tutoring in elementary schools sometimes feels like a little silly, but it is absolutely very, very important. If a kid is having a little bit of trouble, it's best not to wait until they're having a lot of trouble. Childhood occupational and speech therapy is another big one, especially for kids with other types of invisible disabilities. So, and there's kind of some weird stigma surrounding occupational therapy because people think, oh, you only do occupational therapy once you're of working age. Occupational therapy simply means helping your body and your mind do what it is supposed to do and operate its best. And those can be super helpful with people with any range of disabilities, for people who aren't neurotypical, all sorts of ways. Specialized education environments are super duper helpful, both for children with developmental disabilities and for people who have been classified as being gifted. There are ways that being gifted can actually put you at risk from the rest of the people around you, including if you really don't have enough intellectualness to chew on, that can kind of alienate you from your community and cause you to do some deviance in your teendom. And then specialized healthcare. Specialized healthcare is, again, important early intervention, but especially for people who are autistic in any way or people who have fetal alcohol syndrome. Those two childhood issues that we can identify early in childhood have very, very strong scientific data showing that if we get people help with that stuff very early on, it can really help them become the person that they ultimately want to be and overcome a lot of those issues. Unfortunately, early interventions are often underutilized by poor and working class communities. They're underutilized by most communities, but they're especially underutilized by these ones. Some of those factors include a lack of community knowledge of available programs. People, there's a lot of stuff happening in your community that you don't know is actually happening. There's a lot of great restaurants around you, maybe, I don't know where you are, but that might be around you that you don't know about. There's a lack of appropriate facilities. So maybe there isn't a good mental health care facility. Maybe there isn't a good physical therapy facility in your area because, unfortunately, in the United States, those places are run for profit. They're run as a business, and thus businesses don't want to locate in areas where no one can buy things. Capitalism's terrible. Health insurance almost never covers these interventions. My daughter had to have some kind of light physical therapy, and we're really fortunate that we were able to have a couple sessions, but we were only allowed to have 6 actual sessions of physical therapy. Thank goodness the stuff that she needed help with was actually relatively easy to fix. Well, some of the things, and then other things we learned as parents on how to fix that stuff. The state of so many of these things, I don't need to tell anyone. The way we do healthcare, the way we do mental health in the United States is broken. And then additionally, there are issues surrounding culture of poverty that directly keep people from utilizing early interventions. Ideas that mental or physical health issues should be hidden, that they should not be obvious because that is going to hurt you in some way. And then issues surrounding, quote, accepting charity when the reality of the matter is these programs exist to help people just like you. It's so real. I have family members that refuse to get these kind of helps because they think it's expensive, even though it's taken care of, and me and my wife can't convince them to do these things. It's tough. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about issues surrounding concern for children. So the fact that poverty really heavily impacts children, that it has a heavy influence on children, shows that poverty is not the result of personal failings. Children can't be or haven't had the chance to be lazy and have poverty impact them, right? Children are poor because their parents are poor. And those parents are usually poor because their parents were poor, their grandparents were poor, and they've probably been poor for many generations. That illustrates what structural poverty looks like. It's very similar to how structural racism exists in society. And if we want to help poor children, we have to change the structures that impact those children. Unfortunately, there are people in our society that don't want to help, but similarly then, they might not acknowledge that they don't want to help. It's relatively easy to identify someone who overtly doesn't want to help kids. They don't want to pay their taxes, whatever, and a lot of those people are very vocal, but there are a lot of others, unfortunately, that also don't want to help, and they might not even be aware that they don't want to help. It could apply to some of you. Maybe it applies to me. The way we can figure out if we're one of those people, we want to change that about ourselves, is to learn a little bit more about the issue itself. Weber observed that there is often a disconnect between how we perceive society and how it actually is. He called this the ideal type versus the real type. And when we compare the way we help children with poverty in the ideal type, how we want to, versus the real type, how we actually do, it really is very helpful for helping us understand this phenomena. So to restate it in case you missed it, the ideal type is how an element in society is expected to be or how we want it to be, and then the real type is how it actually is. An example, a very clear example is the police. In the ideal type, police are supposed to protect and serve all members of society equally and effectively. The real type, then, it is very true that we have structural racism, we have structural classism in society. Many people have these prejudices. Many of those people aren't actually fully aware of it. And there are other social problems that encourage police due to the social structure, maybe not even due to the individual officer, encourage people in those positions to treat people who don't have power differently to those who do have power, right? I'm not aware, at least, of any situation where a police officer has assaulted, say, the mayor of a city, right? Because that person is a very, very high prestige. But every day there are people who, not just by police, but are treated very badly of very low prestige. And those people of low prestige, those are the people that maybe need our help the most. So when we talk about childhood poverty, in the ideal type, when you just ask someone, do you want to help children in need? Almost everybody says, absolutely, right? And we see our culture looks like it really wants to have kids. There are actually organizations called Save the Children, right? Uh, Tiny Tim in The Christmas Carol is a primo example of the kind of innocent, genuine, beautiful archetype of a child that we really do want to help. And I mean, that's why Dickens used that character, right? So there is a strong desire, a purported desire to help kids. It's really been built into us culturally, but the reality is we don't help them as much as we need to. And if maybe we can fix a little bit of that, if we can bridge that disconnect, we can make a lot of kids' lives better. However, when people actually get a chance to help poor children, they often choose not to. And this is especially evident if the help is more abstract. So government programs that help children, when taxes are cut, now there are a range of different taxes, but especially when municipal and when state taxes are cut, those programs that help children are diminished and sometimes eliminated. So for example, people say they want to help children, but they refuse to vote to raise taxes that would help schools or would help food assistance programs, people who complain about welfare or food stamps, talking about how lazy people are. Well, the fact of the matter is those programs help keep children fed, help keep children safe. Now, there is a thing called enlightened self-interest that is, if you can utilize this, it's a pretty useful approach to make people or encourage people to care about children on the macro level. You can use this in a bunch of different ways, but this is just one example. So the definition of that being is a logic-based rhetorical approach that points out that by helping poor children, we are actually, in reality, helping ourselves. And the reason why this is so helpful is this reality that we human beings are very difficult, very we have problems with thinking on the big picture, right? We have troubles thinking about how our community even works, right? And if we start to think about how the state works, it just becomes way, way too abstract. So, if children, then I'm talking to you, right? If and I'm telling you this is why you should care about children. If children are unable to learn because they're hungry or because of other problems like they're sick or their school isn't good or whatever, they are far less likely to grow up to be productive results. So, if children are hungry, they have to spend more time on remedial education. Thus, if your kids are in school, but you don't care about the poor kids, then those poor kids who are hungry mean that they are taking attention away from your kids, right? So there's a heavy degree of that. Additionally, poorly educated workers will make mistakes or won't innovate, right? If you didn't learn how to do critical thinking skills in high school or in college, and a lot of people have troubles with that, those people will not find new ways to help our economy grow in the future. And a lot of people, unfortunately, who express not really caring about kids, a lot of those people are very concerned with what they call the economy. So to talk about this in terms of economic benefit really can be very helpful. I feel like I'm prepping people for Thanksgiving or maybe Easter dinners that are awkward with their uncles or whatever. Additionally, businesses will find fewer good workers if kids are unable to learn when they're kids, right? And this leads to future staffing shortages. It leads to worse services, right? So if you so put these together, right? If you are voting then to not have school levies that will help the schools serve kids a lot better, then you are voting for in 30 years from now to have a lot worse service when you go out to eat, right? You can often put it that way. Additionally, and this is something a lot of people care about, hospitals or healthcare systems have to pay more on illnesses that are preventable. So, in the United States anyway, where we have to have health insurance to make healthcare so we can have healthcare, uh, there are many, many illnesses that make everyone's health insurance go up that are easily preventable if we can help people while they're kids. Additionally, families lose their housing due to debt and the inability to pay for employment. So, if people lose their housing, then we have to help shelter and feed homeless families. That's one example. If a family loses their housing, if they are foreclosed on their house and you live near that family, then their house being foreclosed and abandoned will hurt your property value. That's a big problem. Additionally, some families or individuals can't access assistance programs, and sometimes that causes people to commit crime in order to survive. And thus, if we do not fund programs that help children, it makes our communities less safe. According to the Childhood Defense Fund, childhood poverty could be reduced by 60% if we were willing to spend $70 billion. And that sounds like a whole lot of money. The reality of the matter is the total cost of childhood poverty in the United States, and that is a big, big number right there, is almost, it's a little over $1 trillion, right? That is a massive portion of our economy of damage to our economy that is caused by kids going hungry and kids not being able to get the education that they deserve. Can you imagine how much different our society would be if every single person, or at least like 98% of people, get a really good education and learn everything they're supposed to? Put it in a different way, every dollar spent in poverty reduction would save $7 from in our economy. It would definitely help us in the long run. So, and there are additionally, when we look at this, there are some human rights issues that are tied in with this. So, this conversation is about way more than an individual not wanting to pay taxes. The debate is deeply embedded in political philosophy that does drive certain politicians and certain policymakers. These are explored in what's called the equality versus efficacy debate. Equality means equalness, and we'll talk about these on the new slides. Efficacy means, is this an effective thing to do? I just like to point out when I use words maybe everyone doesn't know. If you are really want to get to the philosophical roots of all that, Alexis de Tocqueville, was a mid 1800s French philosopher. A lot of his philosophical work went to backing up a lot of philosophies that go to, I shouldn't have to pay to help poor people. And I talked about that previously. I'm not going to go into it too much. I can really rant about de Tocqueville for a very long time. So those who oppose a strong social welfare or safety net program argue that if we try to create a more egalitarian society, a more equal society, via a strong welfare state and redistribution policies that will harm businesses via tax and regulation, then basically society will be in a lot of trouble. These arguments are most commonly made by those who advocate for what's called laissez-faire capitalism, that we should have a capitalist economy where there are no regulations whatsoever, and business should just do whatever business wants to do. Newt Gingrich well, I don't think he's still technically a politician. He is still alive to the best of my knowledge. His work in the 1990s as Speaker of the House did a lot of work to reduce funding of social welfare programs, of programs that help poor people in general. He was actually the one to vilify the word welfare to mean stuff that is given to poor people who don't deserve it, right? He very much and very shrewdly and very intelligently, because Gingrich is a brilliant scholar, actually. Don't underestimate someone just because you don't like them. Gingrich basically made arguments that we shouldn't help all these poors effectively. This is called the efficiency stance. Sorry. Others then argue that if we lower taxes, it will result in a greater inequality and poverty, because capitalism will lead to big winners and big losers. And we see this in our economy today. The reason we have so many billionaires, and we do, I mean, they seem to be, we have thousands of billionaires in the United States. We didn't have that one generation ago. And the reason we started to get it is because all of these programs that helped people stay middle class were stripped, and the billionaires made an amazing amount of money. This is called the equality stance. So just as Gingrich is associated with the efficacy class stance, Bernie Sanders is really a pretty good person to just get in your head in terms of the equality stance. If you already understand both of those people, it's pretty easy to plop them in your head. However, Global evidence stands in direct contradiction for the efficiency argument. Sorry, I keep saying efficiency and efficacy. It's efficiency. I need to knock that off. Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and many other nations have very strong and sophisticated social welfare states. If you lose your job, the government will help you out for a while. If everyone has health care by default, right? A lot of these countries, education is entirely free. And the author, well, I'm sorry, we're not using that same book anymore. The author of the previous book ends that chapter by highlighting that allowing poverty to persist in the United States violates the very principles that our country is founded on, namely liberty, equality, and justice. What the heck does that mean? Check out these slides. So it inhibits liberty, which is the freedom to engage in freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, to have a fair trial, to vote, right? Being poor keeps you less likely to be able to do those things. If someone is charged with an offense, a poor person is less able to afford a lawyer, especially a quality lawyer, to get to court on time because they don't have a car. Maybe they can't afford appropriate clothes. Maybe having grown up poor, they don't know what appropriate clothes are for court, etc. Living in a poor neighborhood, you might not be able to get a government ID. And that's a big deal. That is a huge problem in poor communities, is there isn't a place to actually get your ID from. And if you don't have a car, you're out of luck, really, is what a lot of it comes down to. And so this is the big argument against voter ID laws. And voter ID laws, they're tricky because bypassing stricter laws like this means a lot of people with not very many resources will be kept and prohibited from voting. People lacking in education, additionally, might not know what their civil rights actually are, right? If you don't know what the law is and what the law isn't, it's really very easy to take advantage of you. So, equality. Equality is having the same chances for success as others with similar talents and drives. If you are familiar with the French Revolutions, maybe a lot of Americans are familiar with the Second French Revolution because of the musical Les Mis, right? That was all about liberté, égalité, fraternité ou la mort. That means liberty, equality, brotherhood, or death. That's a slogan of French society. And when considering the definition of poverty is the condition of doing without, as we have discussed in this class, it's obvious that allowing poverty to persist is a violation of equality because you do not have equal access to those same things. Lack of equal access is a lack of equality. If you're poor, you can't compete with other people in the same way. Unfortunately, the concept of equality is present in our American ideal values, but the reality of the matter is that the real type in the United States, we are very, very unequal. And then justice. People get what they deserve based on merit and based on being a human being, not based on how powerful they are in our society. And this matches American ideals in perception, but again, just like equality, not in reality. The American perspective in terms of the ideal type is those who do well deserve it, and those who suffer also deserve it. This is how a lot of Americans believe. Thus, if you don't work hard, you will be poor. The reality of the matter, though, is that many people work very, very hard and have not had the life chances to, or they haven't had the life chances to work hard because there haven't been jobs in their communities. You can't be considered lazy if there are no jobs to have. And additional research has shown that poor people do have similar attitudes, that hard work is important as people of other classes. This is a very powerful piece of information. We survey all classes in the United States, and if it were that you have to believe in hard work and that will get you rich, you would expect that super rich people would believe a whole heck of a lot more in hard work. The reality of the matter, though, is that everyone of all classes in the United States tends to believe in that just about equally. What does that mean? That means a whole bunch of people in every class. Are there some lazy rich people? Yeah. Are there some lazy poor people? You bet. But they're about the same number of lazy people, additionally, in every class. Okay, that's the end of this one. I hope it was helpful, and if you need anything, please just send me an email.